What was 18th Street like in those days? 18th Street was a special place. Once you got to 18th Street, you didn't have to go anywhere else. Whatever you wanted, it's right here.
With freedom in their hearts, nothing but hope in their hands, like Israelites in the wilderness, headed for the promised land. Some came in cars, some came on trains, leaving the barns, the farms, and the plow. Others just took off walking, praying, feet don't fail me now. On the crest of the north wind, they chased the sun and followed the moon. No system of segregation could withstand this black typhoon. Collard greens and chitlins came with them. They were accompanied by the blues, fearless faith beneath their fedoras, and a Lindy Hop in their shoes. Many settled right here in Kansas City with the no turning back state of mind, and settled in the promised land we now call 18th and Vine.
People lived all up and down 18th Street. We had everything we needed on 18th Street.
My family, in particular as far as 18th and Vine, all centers around my grandfather. His name was Arthur Fillmore Bronson. And come to find out, he came from Texas. My grandmother came out of Oklahoma. She was a Cherokee freedman. They came and met my grandfather, and he brought her to Kansas City. I'm going to say it was around 1908, was it, baby? 1910. They established in 1916 Paseo Cab Company. The Bronson family did two things. They started the Paseo Cab Company, and they started the restaurant that's on the corner for years, which was El Norris Cafe.
I was born in 1919 in Hartville, Missouri. Hartville, Missouri, 30 miles outside of Springfield, in a log cabin beside the river. We were poor. My mother and father came to Kansas City in 1920, and my mother died in 1921. I was 13 months old when she passed. Now my father, he's gonna split, he's gonna get a job. You know how it was in 30 days. So he left, and my grandparents took care of us. John and Sally Denton.
Theron B. Watkins and his brother, J.T. Watkins, started a funeral home in 1908, 1909, 17th and Lydia. And him and his brother came here from Indiana. Now, he didn't have any kids, no relatives, and his brother died, J.T. died. And he met my grandmother, which his name was Olivia Hughes Riley. Lived in Parkville, Missouri. And her mother and grandmother came from the plantations in Platte County at the airport, where the airport is right now, the Hughes Plantation. Had about 10 or 12 slaves. So after slavery, they moved to Walden, and then they moved to Parkville with a lot of other families. And so she met T.B. Watkins in the early 30s and married him. And that brought about us coming to Kansas City from New York. I was born in New York. So I came here about 1946. I was about 2, 3 years old. And we stayed in old TB's house, on 25th and Benton Boulevard, on the 3rd floor. And the business was in 17th and Lydia. And the business of 17th and Lydia, it was called the Watkins Brothers Undertakers.
I was not born here, but I've been here since I was 2 years old. My mother, I'm a Heinz 57. My grandfather's Mexican, my mother is half Mexican, half black. My dad's Indian. I was born on a reservation. 1925, in Cowichai, Oklahoma. I've always been, from the time I was a little child, I was a jazz lover. and didn't really recognize that as a fact. You know, it was just, I just liked the music. So I'd go sit back in the corner and listen to music. I didn't bother anybody, nobody bothered me. They used to have what they call cutting sessions, and they were generally held in the subway. And the bands, those bands would play against the Kansas City bands. And then one of those nights was the night where Charlie Parker got his name, Yardbird. He had been playing desperately, as hard, you could tell he was, as hard as he could play. And they laughed him off the stage. And he turned around and walked to the front door, and he turned around and said, "I'll be back." And he came back. When he came back, he was world famous. You felt much safer than you do now. Nobody really bothered anybody, and there were about, I'd say, 30% whites down here all the time. And there were some incidents, but the man who owned the town, you could do whatever you wanted to as long as you called him. Nothing to it. As long as you, well, not always voted, because a lot of them didn't even vote, but as long as you were closely associated with Pendergast, you could do anything you wanted to do.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Pendergast, and it is a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. I moved down to Kansas City, about 1890 or so, when my brother Jim was getting started in politics, and I came to help him a bit. I learned my politics from Jim, and one of the things that he taught me is that a man's vote is good wherever and with whomever. So white or colored, the vote's the same. Now these days, we've got a real lively colored section of town around the 18th and Vine area, and up to 12th Street and Vine as well. There's some very lively clubs there, and I know some of the fellows that run them. So I made friends especially with a couple of fellows down there. Felix Payne, who was, well, how can I describe Felix? He was a number of things, but very important in the community. And then there was Dr. William Tompkins. Now, Dr. Tompkins was a medical doctor, but both of them had an ear for politics, and they also had a little flair for writing. So we started up a newspaper called the Kansas City American. Dr. Tompkins was the editor, and Felix was in charge of getting it distributed. This was to compete with the Kansas City Call.
My name is Felix Payne. Like a lot of other people, I came to Kansas City at the turn of the century because of the opportunities that it afforded. So I made money blacking boots, hopping bales, carrying dishes, shooting craps, promoting clubs, shows, prize fights, amusement parks, baseball teams, barbershops, pool house, and railroad excursions. I became the Negro Policy King. I owned the Sunset Club on 12th Street, the Subway Club on 18th and Vine, and the Eastside Musicians Club on 12th and Highland. My singing bartender, Big Joe Turner, him and Pete Johnson put 18th and Vine on the map with a song called Piney Brown's Blues. But since we weren't allowed to go to the white schools, hospitals, or swimming pools, most of the money that I made, I put back into the institutions that cater to us, like Wheatley Hospital and Paseo YMCA. Negroes now vote Democrat instead of Republican because in 1928, William J. Tompkins and I published the American newspaper and organized 75 black Democratic clubs across the state of Missouri.
There's a lot of history on 18th and Vine.
Going back to the whole thing of segregation and integration, we did not have a solution for the transition after the accommodations law had come into play. Businesses just dropped, because the majority of people says, hey, we're now free. We can go and shop wherever we want to shop. And they forgot about where they came from.
Your scope of operation is widened out to the point where you're becoming, so to speak, a citizen of the world rather than a citizen of the ghetto.
Integration, man. Everything that we ever had is gone now because of that.
Integration changed it. Integration.